for us to look into certain things. This is my first video, and I want people to really look into what I'm talking about and really pay attention to what I'm about to say, okay? I think it's time we do a little walkthrough into the holy books. What were they called in the book and what are they called today? It's a little walkthrough into ancient time and what is life today, because when people say land colonization, they're not looking at, gee, the land was already there, but people tried to take over it, and there were the pagan people versus the Abrahamic converted people, right? And that's where everything began from. So the first land we are going to take into, and what was it called in the Bible? Can anybody guess what it is? Let's take a look into this next video.
Where water flows through underground pipes, where gardens hang from the tops of terraces so high they seem to float in the air, and where all of this happens 600 years before Christ was born, while the rest of the ancient world still lived in mud huts and drank water from open wells, there was a place on earth where more than 200,000 people woke up every day within walls so wide that 2 chariots could race side by side on top of them. This city had straight avenues, temples covered in gold, and palaces with gardens irrigated by machines that shouldn't have existed at that time. And you have heard its name many times, Babylon. But here is the question almost no one asks. What was it really like to live there? Not as a king, not as a priest, but as an ordinary person who woke up in the morning, had breakfast, worked, and came home. What did they see? What did they smell? What did they eat? What did they fear? The answer is so surprising that it will completely change the image you have of this city. Let's start with the moment you approach Babylon for the first time. You are walking through the Mesopotamian desert, modern-day Iraq, and the heat is brutal, over 113 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer. The landscape is flat, dry, and monotonous. Sand and more sand. And suddenly on the horizon something appears that makes no sense. First, you see a dark line. Then that line grows, gains shape, and gains color. And when you get close enough, what stands before your eyes is a blue wall. That's right, blue. The outer walls of Babylon were coated with glazed bricks in deep blue tones, decorated with relief figures of bulls and dragons, painted in yellow and white. Herodotus, the Greek historian who visited the city around 450 BC, was so stunned that he wrote, "Babylon surpasses in splendor any city of the known world." And keep in mind, Herodotus had already seen the pyramids of Egypt. The numbers are hard to process. The inner wall had a perimeter of 26 kilometers, 26. To give you an idea, a modern marathon is 42 kilometers, meaning the inner wall of Babylon alone covered more than half a marathon. The thickness, according to Herodotus, about 25 meters. That is wider than a 4-lane highway. And the height reached 90 meters in some sections, the equivalent of a 30-story building. Now, modern historians believe Herodotus exaggerated the measurements. Archaeological excavations by Robert Coldewey, begun in 1899, suggest that the inner wall was about 12 meters high and 6 meters thick, with a second outer wall of similar dimensions. But even these reduced numbers are extraordinary for the ancient world. And between the 2 walls, there was a water-filled moat fed by the Euphrates River, making any frontal attack practically suicidal. But here is the detail no one tells you. The walls were just the shell. What Nebuchadnezzar II built inside them would make any ancient visitor question if they had entered another world. You would cross one of the city's 8 monumental gates, and the most famous of them was the Ishtar Gate, dedicated to the goddess of war and love. This gate still exists. It is in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, reconstructed from the original pieces excavated by Coldewey. And when you look at it, the first thing you feel is that this shouldn't have existed at that time. Cobalt blue glazed ceramic bricks with 575 relief animal figures, bulls, lions and dragons, individually molded and colored. Each figure glowed. Imagine passing through this gate at dawn with the sunlight hitting these blue and gold animals. The effect was deliberate, to make you feel small, to make you feel like you were entering the domain of the gods. And after the gate, you would step onto the procession way, a ceremonial route nearly a kilometer long, with 12-meter-high side walls, all coated with the same glazed bricks and decorated with 120 relief lions, 60 on each side, representing Ishtar. The floor was made of white and pink limestone slabs, and each slab had an inscription on the bottom that said, "I am Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, son of Nabopolassar, king of Babylon. I paved the street of Babylon with slabs for the procession of the great Lord Marduk. May Marduk, my lord, grant me eternal life." He signed the floor. He literally stamped his name under every stone where people stepped. This says a lot about Nebuchadnezzar's ego, but also about the scale of resources he had at his disposal. If this has already impressed you, leave a like right now so this video reaches more people who love biblical history. Now let's get into real life, because Babylon wasn't just palaces and temples. It was a living, noisy city, full of people from every corner of the ancient world. And the daily routine of an ordinary Babylonian was much more sophisticated than its. The surrounding rooms were dark and cramped, functioning more as storage and sleeping quarters in the winter. The houses did not have windows facing the street. Everything faced inward toward the courtyard. This was intentional. It protected against the heat, the dust, and the eyes of neighbors. Breakfast, if we can call it that, was simple. Barley bread, dates, and beer. Yes, beer. Babylonians consumed beer in quantities that would impress any modern person. But it wasn't the beer you know. It was a thick, cloudy drink made from fermented barley bread, often consumed with a reed straw to filter out the solid bits. There were at least 20 different types of beer, catalogued in cuneiform tablets. Sweet beer, dark beer, thin beer, superior quality beer. It was the drink of the people. Men, women, and children drank it, not because of alcoholism. The fermentation purified the water, making it safer than drinking straight from the river. It was literally a matter of public health. And the food? Here comes something that will surprise you. We have Babylonian recipes, real recipes, written on clay tablets dating from approximately 1750 BC, the oldest recipes ever recorded by humanity. 3 tablets, preserved in the Yale Babylonian collection, describe more than 35 recipes for stews, broths, and meat dishes. Lamb cooked with beets, onion, garlic, cumin, and coriander. Beef broth seasoned with leek and beer. Stuffed pigeon roasted in a clay oven. We are talking about sophisticated cuisine, with layers of seasoning and preparation techniques that show centuries of gastronomic tradition. But food wasn't the same for everyone. And here begins the part that reveals how Babylon really worked from the inside. Babylonian society was rigidly divided into 3 classes. At the top were the Owilim, full citizens with rights, landowners, wealthy merchants, priests, and palace officials. In the middle were the Mushkenum, free men but without property, who depended on the palace or the temple to survive. And at the bottom were the Wardum, slaves. And when I say slaves, I'm not talking about an abstraction. The Code of Hammurabi, written in Babylon around 1754 BC, dedicates dozens of laws to the treatment, purchase, sale, and punishment of slaves. A slave could be bought for the equivalent of 20 silver shekels. For reference, an ox cost between 10 and 15 shekels. In other words, a human being was worth little more than a farm animal. Now here is an important nuance. Slavery in Babylon was not exactly like the modern slavery we know. Slaves could own property, conduct business, accumulate money, and in many cases, buy their own freedom. Some slaves ended up wealthier than free citizens of the Mushkenu class. Hammurabi's laws even stipulated punishments for those who mutilated a slave without justification. The owner lost half the slave's value as a fine. It wasn't compassion, it was property protection. The slave was an investment, and damaging them was a financial loss. But don't romanticize this. Slaves could be branded with iron, runaways were hunted. Anyone who helped a slave escape paid with their own life. That is what Law 15 of the Code of Hammurabi says verbatim. And female slaves were frequently used as concubines. Was a slave's life in Babylon better than in many ancient civilizations? Perhaps. But it was still the life of someone who belonged to another person. And now comes a detail that changes the whole story. A large portion of the slaves in Babylon during the Golden Age, the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II, between 605 and 562 BC, were Jews. The book of 2 Kings, chapter 24, verse 14, records that Nebuchadnezzar deported 10,000 captives from Jerusalem in the first deportation, in 597 BC. Among them were the best craftsmen, blacksmiths, soldiers, and all the nobility. The prophet Ezekiel was among the deportees. Daniel, according to tradition, had already been taken years before, still a teenager, in the first Babylonian incursion. Imagine being Daniel. You are a young man from the nobility of Jerusalem, raised in the faith of the God of Israel, and suddenly you are walking chained for 1,500 kilometers across the desert until you reach a city that makes Jerusalem look like a village. You cross the Ishtar Gate. You see the shining dragons and bulls. You hear languages you don't understand. You smell incense burning in the temples of gods that your parents taught you to reject. And now they tell you your name is no longer Daniel, it is Belteshazzar, in honor of the god Bel. They want to erase who you are. If you believe that God never abandons his own, even in is faithful. But let's return to the streets of Babylon, because the daily life of this city still has much to reveal. After breakfast, the city woke up for good, and the sound was unmistakable. Imagine the noise of thousands of people moving at the same time, vendors shouting prices in the markets, hammers hitting in the metalworking shops, wagon wheels creaking on the stone, the lowing of oxen. Century BC, while most of the world was still bartering goats for wheat, Babylon already had compound interest contracts recorded in clay.
So as you already know, Iraq was Babylon, right? Now imagine who were the Hashemites. We don't know who the Hashemites are called today. Some don't. I'm probably going to look up them next. It's important to understand all the names in the Holy Book in order to understand life today. If people don't like to pay attention to this stuff, they're definitely not going to understand society of the war today, because there are many, even today, Christian countries who are linked to ancient time who are not willing to support America. Everything starts with ancient times. There's only two faiths that converted people, Christianity and Islam, and versus, well, Judaism, who started with the pagan days. And the only one who really got linked to them were the Canaanites. So I think it's really important. I'm going to start posting little itty bitty videos from ancient time to have for people to have a better understanding. Previous life, what is life today? And thank you so much. I think this is the best time for me to post videos to take a look in. Like I said, I don't really do videos because I don't know what people would be interested in, but I think this is a good one. Stay tuned. And thank you, y'all. If you are looking ways to support me, just feel a way to support me would be subscribe my channel, follow me on Twitter or Instagram, and once that's about it. I'm not looking for anybody to do money with me. Support me by joining Twitter, my Instagram, and YouTube. Thank you, everybody, and thanks for all your support.